Well, hello everyone, and welcome to AIM's Insight Series webinar, Modernizing Government Information Management with AI and Automation. I'll be your host. A bit by way of introduction for me, my name's Richard Medina. I'm co-founder, partner, and a VP of consulting at DocuLabs. We're a management consulting firm. We've been around since 1993. We're based in Chicago. And we specialize in what AIM does. So that's information management and information governance and process optimization. We grew up, since 1993. Back then it was document management, imaging, some workflow, and today it's very much AI-based automation. So today is going to be a busy schedule, and it's going to be fast-paced. So there are 7 chapters, as it were. The first one is me blathering a little bit more by way of introduction, and then we'll have Mark Patrick, the records officer with the U.S. Department of Defense, who will give the keynote. And Mark will give us some inspirational words and so on to buck up and be flexible and ready over the next several years. And he'll talk about records management being about effectiveness rather than with compliance as a byproduct. He'll also talk about the evolution of the workplace. Then we'll have a few questions, Q&A. The second piece, we'll have about 5 minutes of Q&A with me. Then we'll move on to Joe from Fife. Joe is the VP of Business Operations, and he'll talk about AI and information management and governance. Then we'll talk, then Sushil will talk, and he'll from IBML, and he'll talk about one great area of AI-based automation, which is intelligent document processing. So in the last few years, great advances have been made in the ability to classify, extract, validate, and do stuff with the data that's captured, that's trapped in documents until it's released. Then we'll have a panel with all 4 of us, and we'll talk for about 40 minutes on these topics. How am I doing, Sasha?
Doing great.
Okay. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mark. Mark?
Awesome. Can you hear me all right?
We certainly can.
I have a schedule, so okay. Well, I want to say first, thanks to AIM for inviting me to participate and speak. If you check my LinkedIn bio, you'll see that I have some rich personal history with AIM, and I'm honored to be a member of the Council of Fellows, number 225. But I want to thank also to Fife and IBML for engaging this very diverse group of folks I've seen from the demographic layout, and let's get to it. So 20 minutes goes by in a flash, so I'm going to just do some introductory stuff and sort of riff around 3 big ideas and kind of wade through some highlights of our strategy and policy as we do that. I'll talk about the abiding nature of records in changing times, operational versus compliance mindset, and an evolving workplace requirement. I'm going to include some photos that are actually from the DoD website, so they're pretty new, which is, I think, kind of cool. In this first photo here of an F-16 in a tight maneuver, only days or weeks old here. And I want to put these pictures in a records context as we go through. So a typical Air Force F-16 pilot spends about 9 months in training, 70 hours flying, 69 hours in a simulator, 59 sorties, 245 hours of academics, and the average Air Force captain is around 27 years old, which is kind of at my age now, seems kind of frightening. But I have my own version of that. So for a bit more intro here, there's me getting my wings pinned on by my dad back in 1987. What I want to talk about background-wise is that the records officer for the Department of Defense is organized under the DoD CIO. The DoD CIO is a Senate-confirmed political position, and currently right now, the person occupying that, Miss Katie Arrington, is performing the duties of. She is political, but she has not been confirmed by Senate, and the administration has recently nominated Miss Kirsten Davies, who's coming from private sector with a strong cybersecurity background. The CIO for the Department of Defense is the principal staff assistant to the Secretary of Defense and has IT, including both national security and defense business systems under their purview, information resource management, efficiencies, all material relating to the DoD information enterprise, such as cybersecurity, communications, information systems, and more. So she has a principal deputy and then 4 deputy CIOs. There is the principal deputy for command, control, and communications, cybersecurity, information enterprise, and resources and analysis. Resources and analysis is the kind of the budgeting side of the CIO, but it's also where I fall. So the senior agency official for records management is Miss Chris Condon. She is also the deputy CIO for resources and analysis. And under her, I am the director of CIO statutory implementation, a new role I recently inherited from my supervisor who retired, and I have maintained my existing role, the DoD records officer. So a small staff of civilians and contract personnel that have responsibility for policy in the records area, specifically for policy strategy, kind of collaboration, advocacy, outreach, like things like this for the entire Department of Defense. So in addition, under the CIO statutory implementation hat, there's 508, some privacy, and other DoD-wide portfolio items, and some that just are within the CIO's office. In that collaboration advocacy role, I reach out to the DoD components, of which there are several, and interact directly with their records officers and kind of maintain communications through regular Teams meetings. And I kind of use a Teams channel as a blog, so I'm interacting with them directly. I keep kind of an open door policy so that I can try to remain aware of records and or the challenges that they're facing. I'm sort of the principal representative to the National Archives for the department, although the military departments and some other elements of DoD engage NARA directly at times. So that's kind of where I'm organized policy-wise, and all these pilot policies are available online at the DoD CIO library, so you can Google that and you can get to all of these policy documents. Just enumerate the main ones here. So our records policy is the DoD records program is 5015, DoD instruction, DoD manual 8180, IT planning for electronic records management. I'll touch briefly on that. Then there's a directive type memorandum that talks about standards for records management capabilities and programs, including IT, and then the DoD records strategy, which I'll pull some graphics for this presentation, which was signed out by the Deputy Secretary of Defense shortly after I arrived in November of 2023 from some almost 16 years on the joint staff as the Director of Information Management there. And the picture is in my kind of the end of my career. So you saw the beginning picture there with my dad pinning on my wings and my last tour of duty in Bulgaria as the U.S. Naval Attaché there. So those are just for fun. Okay. First point, simpler one, is that despite, the change of administrations, military members, civil servants, contractors, missions, this is a very dynamic organization, and administrations come and go, records abide, right? So although there might be changes at the National Archives or, agency disruption as the new administration makes the changes it's going to make, records are going to be there. And so that's kind of something for the community. And I'll talk a bit about community as I walk through here. Needs to just keep in mind that this institutional memory of our organizations is always has been, always will be, and into the future remains important. Recognize that the records, data, information, the knowledge that's embedded in those, if it's well managed, that knowledge will stay in the organization. So pendulum swing one way, swing back the other, records abide. A note on this picture as I put it up, 2 thoughts. Actually, I recognize this guy's last name. I can't pronounce it correctly probably, but Duma Dog. he's a Marine. And if anybody knows, like the nickname for Marines is Devil Dog. And I'm like, this guy had to be a Marine because his name is too close to Devil Dog. Anyway, when I look at this picture, I think about a personnel record, a medical record, a training record, records for maintenance on this equipment. There's so many records associated with military members and the management of them at the micro and macro levels, incredibly important. But um, very important to me in this role is my recognition that this information, these records, this data is incredibly important to senior decision makers who are making decisions that impact lives of millions of our service members, our nation's sons and daughters, and vast sums of taxpayer dollars. In our DoD record strategy, we refer to something we call decision advantage, deploying the full spectrum of DoD information for decision advantage. And I'll talk more about that as we go on. So it's a quick snapshot of the DoD, just pulled yesterday from the website. So first, I want to note it's the largest government agency, and its mission embedded in that little square up there to provide the military forces needed to deter war and ensure our nation's security. And I very much feel like I support that mission directly. It also states in there that the department is growing and grown and evolved, and that evolution means constant change, and it definitely applies in the information space. So, huge national defense budget, 3.4 million folks, 4,800 sites in over 160 countries. So when I used to give presentations to the Joint Staff, just about the joint headquarters components that I was responsible for, the next slide I would usually put up is a person breathing in and out of a paper bag because it's an amazing sort of portfolio size-wise to consider the records associated with this tremendous organization. So let's go into the second point, which is a kind of a mindset thing, and I want to paint a picture for you. You may be here already, but my experience has shown me that a lot of people don't think about records this way. And so this graphic, which comes right out of our strategy, sort of connects information to decision makers. And I think it's something that's important for folks in the information space to understand, believe, and recognize that they have, in addition to their information management role, whatever vertical or part of that they play in, that they can explain this. Because the rationale is, if you view records and information management as principally a compliance activity, it's much more difficult to compete for resources than if you can express that basically the same activity as a direct mission support. And in my mind, decision advantage occurs on the day-to-day basis in this situation. So for me, for example, when I was at the Joint Staff, that blue head at the top decision maker was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they were actually passing recommendations on to either the Secretary of Defense or the President regarding the use of U.S. military personnel to do things. And below that person were action officers on their staff. They were accessing the institutional memory of the organization through various repositories, classified, unclassified, intelligence, business systems, all sorts of systems. And they were synthesizing and filtering this to answer questions and draft recommendations for that decision maker. So the understanding of what this looks like in your organization, in my mind, as you play the role, and I know that there's a variety of roles that are in the audience today, is and all of them need to understand this, is to recognize that this doesn't happen by accident, and there are things that you can do that can make this happen well, that can ensure that that decision maker has the information that they need at the speed they need it, with the depth of analysis that they need, so that they can make the best possible decisions, given all that information, which will surely be part historical, and then part, a real-time analysis involving different types of data. So if you can't tell that story well, then you will, as has been, a challenge with records and information management programs in the past, continue to compete poorly for resources because all folks in any government are constantly working with a limited amount of resources and are having to make economical decisions about where they spend money. So this is kind of drives me. This does not mean that those compliance factors aren't important. This is really an internal marketing thing. Compliance comes as a byproduct of doing the things that you need to support the decision maker because you will necessarily build the information infrastructure in there that's going to serve them best. So it's really just how you talk about it. Records, data, information, these things. So I would add that among all these systems that are listed in this graphic, that the business systems that support them might not be depicted here, but they're definitely there. Correspondence systems that move, final products back and forth, etc. So a final thought about strategy. The strategy that we put out there, even though we're a very large organization, I contend that that strategy can be scaled down to smaller organizations, larger organizations, so it can scale. And I advise if you are considering a strategy that you might take a look at our strategy. And we've had some folks reach out to us to talk about the challenges that they face with their own strategies in varying environments. A bit here, AI and efficiency. The technology is evolving so that this sort of unstructured data set, or a lot of the traditionally viewed types of records that reveal themselves in documents and PowerPoint slides and spreadsheets, is becoming the most important data set in the organization, as opposed to simply the structured data sets. But it's important as you decide how you're going to spend your limited resources, time, etc., in this space, is that you remember that you are best served by showing value to the mission and not simply compliance, because it gets back to that marketability. So I would use that in your decision making, sort of, put priority on those. So quick picture here on the difference between systems and the information and records contained in the systems. The key note here is in the legend, the first comment is that there has been historically, in our view, a mismatch between the lifespan of records in the systems and the lifespan of the IT system itself, which has led to like 11th hour flails about what to do with that information, because you need to sunset an aging system and then bring a new system online. And our contention is that you need to begin planning for that records information, that data, at acquisition, not at the short time before sunset. So that requires resources, it requires forward thinking, and to have your migration, everything thought through, from ensuring that metadata and the data itself remains intact to get into a new system and continue to manage that data in accordance with an approved disposition authority. So big idea there that I wanted to throw out from the strategy. The three main goals in our strategy are curation, automation, and governance, and we're working through this through working with our CIOs authority to sort of put out priorities. And the challenge is the DoD is so big, there are multiple IT budgets. The services have their own budgets. Some of the large DoD components have their own IT budgets, but the CIO can state priorities. And one of our big ones is resourcing the automation of records management processes. So that strategy has a notional 5-year implementation plan, which is in there. You can find, we've made some headway, but there's a lot of hard work ahead. We're sort of in the year 2 kind of frame. The DoD M8180, which I'll talk about in a second, is kind of complementary. It's for IT planning and electronic records management. So moving to the picture here, just a note of encouragement to see that the U.S. Navy recently working with our NATO allies quite well. And one of my favorite points about this picture, as I looked at it the second time, was that the commanding officer on the right hand waving his hand is smoking a pipe, which I thought was pretty meme worthy of a ship's captain and kind of cool. So records, if you consider the records in this picture, the records, again, personnel records, financial, operational, maintenance, alliance records, lessons learned, training, metrics of success and achieving objectives, so on. This picture, to me, in my mind, represents so many different kinds of records that need to be properly taken care of. Um, this is an operational situation. These folks are mission focused. And again, as you decide which projects to undertake, I would say it's important that you focus on projects that will help your mission focused folks achieve their jobs. Okay, so that's kind of the second point I wanted to spend a few minutes on. And then I'll move on to some thoughts about the evolution of the workforce. So if you're a federal person in government, there can be hesitancy right now. Organizations are being reorganized, folks are retiring early, parts of the federal government are going away completely. And the reality is those records are still all right there, and the tech environment is continuing to change. If you have the bandwidth, if you're not changing jobs, whatever your personal case may be, I would say do not stand still. This is a time to continue to upskill and keep learning. Recognize that you will not be successful either in your organization you're in now if it gets smaller, or if you have to change gears and go to a different role. You will not be successful alone. You'll need to collaborate with many folks to accomplish your objectives. You'll need to build an internal network in your organization. And I think you need to cultivate an external network as well. So organizations like AIM, ARMA, Nagara, other groups that are out there, maybe local to you, that it depends on your focus, whether you're IT focused or AI focused, whatever it may be, but you need to find that community, find your people. That's a recommendation I have for you. Um, we're trying to use tech to minimize the burden on our end users. And so we've kind of locally come up with this phrase, zero-click records management, which was really actually a MITRE term, but we've embraced, and it really gets to that idea of leveraging technology to minimize the burden on the mission-focused folks so that they're not spending inordinate amount of collateral duty time doing information and records management tasks. Um, so one of the things that comes to mind when you talk about workforce is career paths in this space, which there are varying, and I'll kind of riff on a couple of them, but recognizing that depending on where you are in your career, whether you're at the beginning, the middle, or towards the end, there are decisions to make, and the environment and landscape is changing. Everyone needs to continue to grow and understand how these various verticals or whatever overlap. There's kind of a Venn diagram in my mind of records, information, data, IT, everything around the space. So you may be coming at it from your own personal perspective, but there's the ability to move between these because they're so overlapped if you are in the space. So I would say that beyond in the beginning of your career, just like that F-16 pilot had to learn the basics as they progressed as a military officer, and just as you progress as an information professional, that you have to go beyond that initial technical skill set. You start to learn marketing, managerial, and financial stuff, whether that's internal, external marketing, and then the integration and interpersonal collaboration, systems engineering, becoming a super user in organizational information systems that your organization might use, and acquiring knowledge about all the systems in your organizations, the records those systems contain or potentially contain, and data and information and the relationship, records, implications of that data and information. So I think in this environment, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, being around a table with folks who speak dialects that are unfamiliar to you, and you need to learn those dialects. So a data professional may speak about something that you would call a different word. And I've referred to this in the past as kind of the digital Tower of Babel. And we need to not let that get the best of us, because we need to speak those dialects, because it's going to take a bunch of folks to get this to work. So next slide is really like a quick snapshot of the DoD 8180, because these building blocks, some in oversight, some are operations and maintenance, get to all of the technical aspects of what it takes to leverage technology for electronic records management. So this document it's like 88 pages long. It's kind of heady stuff if you're just a traditional records person, but I would challenge you to get into this and have a good understanding of it. Some of you may already, some of you may be strong in IT, and I'm starting to notice this, that you're starting to see folks who are an amalgam of traditional records management skill set and the IT background that you need to actually do this electronic records management. This document goes into these in detail. Is kind of targeted towards IT and acquisition folks, but understanding why it is and how to talk to those folks is important. There's some practical checklists in here, and each of these areas are covered in some detail. So let me just jump to a quick uh, show of and I can see my time is getting tight here, but last couple slides. What we envision the workforce changing from the state at the top to the state at the bottom, the future state, is that your kind of mission focused folks will, over time, the orange piece, the records responsibilities, they need to do less of those. And a cadre of folks that focus on that need to be very focused on that. So the concept I threw out of there of zero click is probably more zero click for the blue guys, as we've come to refer to them locally, and lots of clicks for the orange guys, who are sort of super users in the records platforms that an organization might use. So in the big team here, we call this the flower diagram locally. The records team in the center only succeeds based upon its collaboration with all the other petals in this flower: IT, data, acquisition, functional experts in the organization that will help them understand the record types that they're trying to help manage. And then the senior leadership staff that are benefiting from the way this is all architected, so that they can have their teams can access that information for day-to-day business use to help with decision making. So I want to suss this out just slightly deeper. So the colors, by the way, are random, blue and orange. I think they actually, one of my lead contractors went to Bucknell. I went to UVA, so we kind of like argued about blue and orange. They're both those schools' colors. But we also sort of talked about what we call the green guy, which is from the previous slide, and he's green because he comes sort of from the IT pedal, or he's the person on the records management team, ideally, who interacts with that IT team, is more of a systems architect type person. It's the person who could take that 8180 and, working potentially with some test type architects, really ensure that the system of systems across an organization is engineered in such a way that you can lifecycle manage the data and records or potential records across that system. I put question marks on there as AI and data science becomes a part of how we do that. That maybe that's green, or maybe there's another color, but the bottom line is that you have this team that is working across the entire organization, and there are some distinct roles, and you may find yourself gravitating towards one of these, and just recognizing that this is how the organization is evolving. But there is nobody, the group in the middle is kind of overtaking the group that used to be traditional records managers that worked in legacy physical records, and that in the future, you have to be orange. You have to be somebody that is at a minimum a super user of the records management applications to do this in your organization. So last closeout slide is wrapping up on all the 3 points. Records abide, continue to upskill, be confident. You're a part of the mission of your organization, and you should be able to explain that and understand it and feel it deeply. And you're also part of the community, which I'll repeat. The records are about the mission. Learn to show that value, because even though it's an internal marketing thing and compliance is what you're charged with doing, if you can market that connection well, you can get to the resources that you need to do that. Remember, you're a part of a community. You're on a path, so choose your steps deliberately, your collaborators wisely, never stop learning, find that community. So, so here you have a representation of somebody moving up their path, just like this person, this lieutenant colonel. We all have our various paths, and with the help of our colleagues and community, we can go about walking on that path confidently. So I blew through my time, but I think you gave me a little bit extra, Rich. So
I did,
I'll
Mark,
send
and no,
that.
you're doing great. That's fine.
So
I got bottom of the hour. Perfect. So I want to ask you some questions. I didn't start talking at the top because I wanted to get right into it and get into your points. But just a little background. So what we've seen, let's talk about AI for just 1 second and where we are. What we saw in 2023 and 2024 was the advance of the large language models and so on. So an explosion in the abilities of what could be done with these so-called models and so on. So if you use the car analogy, all of us were very focused on the car engine, the new electric engines and so on, and not really so much thinking about the rest of the car. But what's happening now is, yeah, you got these good engines, but they have to actually be put into a car a vehicle that can work. So now the state of the industry is, yeah, we're focusing on operational reliability, on the framework, on putting them to work. So it's the other aspects as well as the models. So it's the orchestration or workflow where you put them to work. It's the logging from beginning to end, something very important to records management, which we'll talk about. It's the human in the loop where you correct the results and you train the system and so on. And it's putting that now car, but also you must have an ecosystem of mechanics and factories that can develop the cars and build the cars and so on. So we're getting much more informed and concerned about the rest of the context where the engines go into. And we're putting them to work into applications, whether it's contracts, lifecycle management, or it's accounts payable, or it's FOIA request answering, or whatever. So with that in mind, and don't worry, I'm getting somewhere, Mark, there's a lot of stakeholders. And so one of Mark's main points was that you have to articulate what the benefits are of information records management in the AI context and be able to sell it. Now we have, so I'm interested, Mark, in some of who the stakeholders are and what are some of the selling points. So for example, what we typically see is you've got the IT developers and so on, and they're very much interested in low effort, low code, no code, the flexibility of the engines and the frameworks. Then there's the operations folks who use the systems, and they're very much interested in accuracy and how much you can automate and how you do error correction and so on. And then you've got the customers, the users of the data, the output down below, and they pretty much don't care about the AI. What they should be caring about is the quality of the information, whether it reduces labor or increases productivity and so on, increases satisfaction of the citizenry or the internal folks at the agency. So I'm wondering, so those are different selling points of these technologies. And I'll shut up for a moment and let you talk. What do you see? How do folks?
Well, I think first off, I agree with you. And I think it gets back to that intercronal marketing thing and knowing the audience that you're in the room with at the time. There's an element of this for vendors too, right? Because vendors may come into an organization with a platform that focuses around records management, maybe or data management, and they think that they have this single point of entry to the person that, whereas you just described that there's this broader ecosystem that you're not going to be moving down the sales funnel if you're only talking to that individual in the organization, because they have to compete for resources. They have to convince somebody that this is worth it. So I think you emphasize my point about having a deeper understanding of your organization, its mission, and the various stakeholders, so that as you make your internal sell for acquisition of software or additional personnel or something like that, that you understand that well enough to show value for that particular stakeholder. So, you'd have to get specific. I mean, when I was at the Joint Staff, and I know we just got a minute here, one of the things that we did was we sort of made a kind of research support element, carved it out of our records team and put it out there accessible to the staff by SharePoint. So when somebody was assigned some project, they could reach out to us and in kind of a support role, we would cobble together information and serve it up to them to speed up that process for them. And the more modern version of that is self-serve through some sort of search engine, but you have to go from where we are now, which is crazy amounts of repositories and data, to getting that data all connected. It's very complex in our environment because of multiple security environments, a classification. It becomes very challenging. I was talking here where I am currently officed at the Judge Advocate General School to a lawyer that's focused on FOIA, and the fact that you can now put a query into an internal search engine and you will pull together a bunch of unclassified information that when assembled mosaically, it could be classified.
Mm.
And that's something unique to this sort of super, AI type search capability. And that's a concern. And she's like, I think there's a policy gap there. And I said, I agree with you. We'll be talking about this more. So there are a lot of challenges with the complexity, but it's all interconnected. Like you do not do this in a silo where I focus on, compliance. To do this successfully, you have to branch out and learn the area and who your particular group of stakeholders are. And because you are limited in resources, you probably have to pick and choose like high impact projects that contribute value to mission in a way that will resonate with senior leadership in your organization and will lead to resources that will continue. You will then continue to grow what you're doing in the organization.
Excellent. And we will talk more. I know that some of you, we'll talk more about metrics and so on. In the panel, I know some of you are also asking questions about information governance and how do we secure information since it seems to be disappearing and so on. And that's definitely on our list of topics to talk about. But now I want to introduce Joe Friedrich from Fife Systems, and he's going to talk about AI and Fife. Joe?
Okay, great. I will keep this party going. I'm going to set my clock here, Rich, but also feel free to remind me. I'll try and set my clock here. All right, Rich, you're going to have to. There it goes. So we're on. Okay, well, everyone, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate AIM as well as Sushil and Rich and Sasha and Mark. Mark Patrick is someone who I've looked up to for quite a while, and I really appreciate being on the same virtual stage as him today, and I look forward to our panel discussion later. Very quickly, introduction. My name is Joe Frederick. I'm the Vice President of Business Operations from Fife. Fife Systems is a 46-year-old, 100% US-owned, US-based software company, and we've been focused on providing automation and AI solutions for federal records operations governance for over 30 years. We got our start with the Department of Defense, within the federal government, within the Department of Defense in 1994. And we've been having a great time doing everything that we're doing here for federal records. My role at Fife is leading our sales, accounts, and contracting teams. And I'm always at the forefront of leaning in and learning more from our customers. And I look forward to learning more from you and understanding what you're trying to learn and hopefully educate you where I can based on our experience. So what I want to talk to you about today, of course, is generative AI and using Gen AI for records. And when I speak to people about this, I think that one of the main questions that comes up, there's a bit of skepticism, right? Folks want to know how powerful is AI today, and is it ready, right? And folks have thought up to this point that AI needs to get better before it can be used and before it can be useful. It needs to get smarter, it needs to get faster, maybe it needs to get cheaper. But what I'm here to tell you today, and hopefully it opens your eyes for those who haven't been seeing this vision, is that, as Rich pointed out, generative AI really got started, I think, towards the end of 2022 in mainstream with ChatGPT being released. And since that time, in April of 23, GPT passed the uniform bar, scoring in the top 10% of test takers. Since then, GPT successfully completes the US medical licensing exam with super high scores. Then you see that Gen AI surpasses human benchmarks in coding assessments within top firms. And then finally, just this past winter, GPT-o1, which was OpenAI's newest reasoning model. There's a new one now, o3, but o1 consistently scores around 120 on IQ tests. And so, this is, I'm here to tell you and explain that AI is smart and it's ready. And, of course, for those of you that are on the line, you are leaders yourselves, but also you have someone that is that you are reporting to, and leadership knows AI is ready, and so they want to know, well, where are you going to use AI, generative AI specifically within your processes? And the good news is that you have a voice, right? And you belong to organizations and institutions like AIM where you're learning, right? And so my goal here today is to empower you so that you can have these AI conversations and determine where it fits within your own organization's processes. Okay. And understanding, of course, that now working with AI and implementing AI is it's really in a way a SMOP, a simple matter of programming. We have to ask ourselves, well, where are we going to apply generative AI to records management? And as at Fight Systems, right, we're leaders in records management. We've been thinking about this for some time. We've deployed an AI R&D lab over the last few years that continues to grow, where we're thinking day in and day out about answering that question and figuring out where to best integrate generative AI into records and records management. So we're here putting AI to work, and we're looking forward again to your feedback and your voice so that we can ensure that we focus on the right areas and that generative AI can become most useful to you. Now, when we think about AI and records management, it's important to think about these two items in a symbiotic relationship, right? And we see them fitting into these two main categories. We have AI for records, and we have records for AI, right? That's AI for records and records for AI. And record insight is the answer for AI for records. When we're talking about record insight, AI for records, we're talking about all the different tools and tooling that are available to help automate records management processes, things like categorization, metadata extraction, PII tagging, redaction, and so on and so forth. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. But it's important to also note, of course, that under records for AI, this is about having all of that clean metadata, this curated set of records, right, that you have coming through under your management. And this is what's really required for other future AI projects at your organization. So if you're someone, a records manager, a data manager, information manager on today's call, and you're in charge of governance of this information, it becomes time to really connect with the chief data office or your chief AI officer and those involved in the AI projects, because they'll be looking to you for this data. As Mark mentioned, you're part of a community. Now's the time, certainly, to be reaching out and connecting with that community. So Fight's first goal, right, our first AI goal was to make categorizing records automatable. And Mark alluded to zero-click records management, which I'm sure many of you on the call are aware of, and it is your next goal beyond M2307. But the major issue that's come up over time, and it's become the linchpin to implementing zero-click records management, is categorizing of unstructured records, right? And so you may have seen a slide like this before. From Fight, we have capture on the left, manage in the middle, and disposition on the right. And this is the way we look at automating the governance of records. Okay, and we've been doing great, obviously, with capturing from all these in an automated fashion from all your different systems, right? That includes cloud systems, as called out in the 8180. And of course, over on the far right side, dispositioning, we're automating that process as well. And of course, in the middle, we're connecting the data and the records that flow through the system back to your retention schedules. And again, we've been doing a pretty good job with this over time, but generative AI just makes it better. So when we look at pre-Gen AI, what was the process? Well, we work with automating records categorization in this process. So in these three different layers, sort of like a sieve. So there's first, we look at the location and metadata of a record, right? And try and do as much as we can there in terms of categorizing. Then we look at content. And then finally, we've been looking at TF-IDF-based categorization, which is a statistical method called term frequency inverse document frequency, which looks at the word content of an existing document and compares it to your corpus, your entire corpus of categorized records. And to dive a little bit deeper here, when we're talking about these first three filters, right, we would look at who, right? Who authored or created the document? Who sent the email? What type of document is it? Does it have a document type attribute that says that it's a contract or something else? Where? So where's the document stored? If it's, is it part of a file share or a SharePoint directory? Or maybe it came off of a system, right? Like a contract system. Well, then we know what that may be. And then, of course, when all else fails, we've been looking into the content of the document, doing word and phrase matching to help find that information. And now the big benefit here with generative AI, right, is that there's an upgrade to the third filter and then a incredible fourth filter that I'll be focused on really today. So previously, the third filter, as I said, was a TF-IDF-based categorization, but now it uses semantic vectors, right? Which is, you can think about it as like how would a human look at this record? Because generative AI does process and does think much like a human brain. That's the artificial intelligence part of AI. And so when it gets to that third step, we can have the AI look at the record and look at your existing corpus of records and compare it the same way that a human would, with form, intent, and all of these other aspects. The fourth powerful filter, right, this all-powerful filter, we call record insight. And time will tell as to whether the fourth filter just takes over all, or we'll still be using all of these filters forever. But it's been quite the breakthrough, and I'm going to show you now how that works and what that looks like. So this is an overview here of record insight. Records on the left side come into the system, and in this middle section here where it says retrieval augmented generation, okay, is where we take your information and your record schedule, and we give this information to the generative AI, right, to the large language model. And in this way, the LLM is acting as this smart brain. It looks at the record, it understands your record's control schedule and any other metadata that may be provided with it, right? Like office or source or anything else. And it evaluates those records just the same way that a records information professional within your group would do so, right? And not only does it evaluate, but it also provides and returns its records choice as well as the justification for why it made that choice. And this is hugely important, and I imagine that we will continue to cover it in our panel a little bit later. But as you implement generative AI, you want to understand the logic in the AI's decision-making, right? How's it done? Did it make sense? Does it fit into our standards? The second reason that it's majorly important to get this categorization justification back and store it alongside the record is because when you're sending permanent records to the National Archives, they are going to need that rationale for that decision. And amazingly, LLMs have the ability to make this determination. It doesn't require any rules, no training, no special modifications to the AI. This isn't machine learning. And we're trusting, of course, the LLM and giving it additional information so it can make the right decision. So we've been conducting evaluations with some agency and department level friends and customers, and we've been holding these blinded studies where we're testing how well AI categorization is working, right? We call these our proofs of concept. And in the study, the ARO gives us their category determination for their group of records as well as the agency's retention schedule. Then we have a blind control group of RIM specialists that make their own determination, and they don't know the ARO's category determination. And then, of course, the AI is also in the blind. It doesn't know. And we have some really interesting results that I want to share with you today. So one of the first areas of optimization that we found is that AI lacks AI lacks the contextual understanding needed when terminology differed between the record description and the actual records themselves, okay? So in this example, severe accident risk, which is mentioned in the record, wasn't recognized as the highest potential risk. The issue here is ambiguity, right? What qualifies as the highest? You may know if this is your field, right? So we're looking at nuclear reactors, and severe accident risk may indeed be the highest risk. But if we want AI to align and understand that, we need to standardize the terms across the retention schedule and within the records themselves. Pretty typically, we're not going to change the records, but we do have the opportunity to improve a record schedule. Okay, what's truly fascinating here is that Record Insight usually matched the ARO's category decisions accurately, and even then, it also outperformed the control group of RIM specialists. So out of the box, right, without any alterations or modifications to the agency's retention schedule, it's already doing better than RIM specialists, and these are expert level RIM specialists. So AI is pretty impressive here. In this example, you can see that it flagged an agreement state program as an interagency committee. And again, this was something that experts missed. And even as I talk about it now, I'm not even sure exactly what these things are. So we also have an observation here, is that even when AI did miss that records officer's exact choice, it still made what we should all consider to be a reasonable human grade decision. But what I mean by that, right, scientifically, is that its selections often aligned with the control group, the RIM specialist control group. So anyway, for most of us, I think we'll agree that that's not just acceptable, it's impressive. right? And we've been really excited by these evaluations, and here's some numbers that maybe make you even more excited. So when we ask ourselves, is your records control schedule ready for generative AI? At the start of the evaluation, 62% of the test queries out of the box were likely automatable. Once we made just a couple modifications, similar to what I demonstrated here today, we were able to bring the number of records that could be automatically categorized up to 83%. That's a huge jump. It doesn't come from training the AI. It's just about improving the documentation so that the AI can make better decisions. Well, what about the remaining 17%, you might be asking? So the remaining 17% at issue here, they deal with big bucket categories, which some of you may have within your retention schedules. It turns out that the big buckets are just as confusing for AI as they are for humans, right? They are overused. And findings show that perhaps big buckets could work with a small number of big buckets and no other categories. We've found a really interesting way to deal with this. It involves some sidecar information that help you split up those big buckets into small buckets so that the AI can make that decision and take you to 100%. So what did we learn from these evaluations? The learnings really indicate that there's an opportunity to advance the records control schedule descriptions to include information, of course, that even a human needs to make the right decision. And in this way, it doesn't just help the AI, but it's going to help your humans too that are still making these decisions. And this is really important. Just like you need for your humans to make the right decision, you need to be explicit, right? You need to prompt them in the right way with exactly the information that they need to make the decision. And of course, the AI is no different. This line of thinking also does indeed apply to a couple other use cases, which I'm going to share now. So another great use case for large language models is, of course, metadata extraction, right? And we're talking about really diving in, bringing metadata out of records, and not just for records management, even though there are some key clear use cases for records management, such as extracting event dates from records to guide your retention, but also for other processes across your organization. And this is really where linking with even that CDAO, the Chief Data Officer, becomes hugely important. You always need good metadata and structured data, and the breakthroughs that are provided by the large language model allow you to get to this information easily, quickly, clearly, and in an impressively better way than the way that the old technology worked. And that's because large language models, right, generative AI, understand context, they understand intent, they understand synonyms, and also relationships. So if you want to, let's say you're looking at a contract document and you're looking for the contract end date, an LLM, right, the generative AI will also find things like expiration date, expiry, end date, period of performance end, etc. You do not have to provide all of those rules and think of every type of use case when you're trying to get this information back from a large language model. It will come back because, again, generative AI understands intent and it understands your content and the context. The other really impressive thing that large language models can do is they can also understand relationships with your data. So if you're looking at a resume, for example, you can find and receive all of work experience, skills, languages, interests, other things, and you can bring that data easily into the system and store it in a structured way to be useful in other parts of your organization. Another great use case that we have here within AI for records is PII detection, as I mentioned. So it's PII detection, tagging, and also subsequent redactions. We all know that it's important to protect PII, right? And it's not just important to protect it on its way out, which is typically how we're seeing it, right? Like during Privacy Act or FOIA request. But we also want to protect that information in place, right? Think about security if we're looking at insider threats. So what we can do, of course, is the previous technologies that were used to find PII involved NLP, regex, and machine learning. And these would look for some things like people, places, social security numbers, credit cards, biometric data, etc. But again, LLMs understand context, and you don't need that level of rules anymore. You just need to understand, and it needs to understand from you, what is the information that you're looking for and trying to protect. So in terms of PII, it's a real game changer. I see that I might be at the end of my time in a couple seconds here. I'll try and get through this very quickly. So
You
it's
got
really
three,
interesting.
3 minutes, Joe. No
Oh,
problem.
fantastic. Thank you so much, Rich. So, okay. So before generative AI, right, when we would go to find PII and redact it, right, within a record, we would look at what's known as explicit PII. So examples, again, like social security number, passport, etc. But with large language models now, you can reveal implicit PII, right? These are details that may be unintentionally, they may unintentionally identify the individuals when combined with other information that you were looking to restrict or prevent in the first place. So in this example here, you see in the green, the explicit PII, we're capturing all of this person, Michael Thompson's information. And down in the red there, if we didn't redact as president of the board in 2014, we're now revealing exactly who we're talking about, revealing that source. And this is a huge advancement that comes from generative AI. LLMs are also happening with CUI detection, right? Controlled unclassified information. And you can quickly and easily find that information. You can take your organization's CUI policies and guidelines and bring that information, just like with records categorization and retention schedules. You can take your records and your CUI policies, bring them through to the smart generative AI brain, and use it as rationale for decisions to automatically protect information within your system. There's also 2 more use cases here. You know, hopefully you're gathering by now, you know, some of the different places where applying AI makes sense within records and FOIA processes. So here's a look at a guided responsiveness review, right? You can use the large language model to help with the first question of does it belong in the collection? And then, of course, if the answer is yes or no, you can then group those like documents. Think about clustering them in a way to say, yes, this record is like this record, and therefore let's apply that determination in a bulk format. These types of applications of generative AI are helping to automate and return real value into these federal records use cases. And lastly, I'll share this note here about semantic search. I think that we're going to be seeing this come up across the board in many different systems. But again, here, this is the ability where you can search for something like cybersecurity breach, for example, and you can return throughout the system more information, right? This is about getting that knowledge, getting deeper, being able to have that information at your fingertips and providing, as Mark says, this decision advantage. Because if you're spending all your time looking for words and phrases, you don't have that information immediately. And so semantic search, of course, is coming, and it's something that's provided thanks to generative AI. All right, Rich. I don't know, there's probably no Q&A here, so I'll just a thank you. Big thank you to the group here today for listening, especially with the technical difficulties that we experienced. If anyone's interested, of course, in continuing this discussion and finding out more, I'd be happy to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time and attention today.
Thanks, Joe. I love Fight's tagline, all of your documents understood and under control, right? That, in a nutshell, that sums up what you were talking about.
Absolutely. Thanks for that tagline, Rich.
Yeah. And then I'd like to bring on Sushil. Hey, Sushil. And we're going to talk about, so we've been talking about mostly the information being in the system just now with Fife. And now we're going to talk about ingesting, bringing it into the system using intelligent document processing. But note that intelligent document processing, if it's already digital, can be used at any point in the life cycle of the information to extract more information, to put it to use, and so on. So in this, what we're going to do is have this as a question and answer panel. If you're game, Sushil, does that sound all right?
Yes, I'm game.
Okay.
Just a quick introduction before we get going. My name is Sushil John. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here with IBML. Many of you on these calls, on this meeting might already recognize us. IBML has been serving the world's largest organizations in government, banking, financial services, insurance, healthcare for the last 3 decades. We help organizations capture documents and data securely and in an intelligent manner from documents from any source that you are able to input into our systems itself. That's what we do as a quick plugin for IBML, and we can get started, Rich.
Thank you. And I should say in our consulting practice, we've seen a lot of IBML machines and they're something to behold. They can get to be gigantic. And so I know some of you are from Canada. We've worked with them with the Canadian federal government. And they are quite amazing. But we're going to talk about IDP. And can we start with defining it? Explain what is intelligent document processing and how does it differ from the 1990s style of OCR and so on, and how it differs from RPA and the other buzzword technologies?
We love acronyms, don't we, Rich, in this industry? So IDP, OCR, ICR, NER, NLP, all of these are great acronyms we have created. I think it makes us look a little bit intelligent, probably. That's why we love them. But bottom line, I think an intelligent document processing system is an end-to-end solution that ingests documents from various sources, be it your scans, emails, PDF, any kind of digitally bound documents. It helps classify the document types depending on what type of document you have, whether it's a contract versus a invoice versus different forms that are being submitted. It helps extract information from these documents using technologies like AI, machine learning, natural language processing, and validates and routes that data to downstream processing systems. When I say downstream processing, if it's invoices and payment related information, it's probably uploading to your ERP for an accounts payable or a payments processing system. If you're a banking or a tax processing organization, that it could be a business system, it could be a records management system like Faith is, or it could be your ECM itself. A little analogy I would like to provide compared to the other terminologies we used here, like OCR, ICR, optical character recognition, or intelligent character recognition. I want to say, if I were to use an analogy of a human body, OCR, ICR is like the eyes that help you see the text in the documents. NLP, natural language processing, or machine learning capabilities are like the brain that helps you understand the text you just read in context. RPA is robotic process automation. I would like to liken it to the hands that go do something with the text you recognized. And process orchestration, which is a backbone for the entire IDP system, is more like a nervous system coordinating everything when to do what. And Gen AI itself is new capabilities that are brought to us by Gen AI capabilities for imagination or to be able to interpret and summarize and reason the information that we have learned, that we have extracted from the document itself. I want to say essentially IDP compared to legacy capture systems, the way I would differentiate it mainly is to say that in a legacy capture system, this ingest, classify, extract, validate, and output to a system seems like serial, whereas in an IDP, it's really not serial. You could have ingestion happening at any point in the cycle. You could have data being read off multiple systems, lookup tables or databases to enrich the information. So an intelligent document processing is a little bit more complex in the sense that the process orchestration that goes beyond it is not necessarily sequential, but can happen depending on what we need the process to do. Does that help?
Sure does. Do you want to explain the difference between centralized and distributed capture? So we now have multiple channels, right? You can be in a big operation center and have a big IBML scanner, or it can be off of one of these, or it can be a printer, or it can just be born digital and stay digital, but need to be cleaned up and validated and so on. But can you talk about some of the differences and when to use which?
Yeah, so I think in a centralized capture solution, which is typically what IBML fulfills for most of our customers, I would say, is all documents are sent to a central location. It's a physical or digital documents where they are scanned, processed, and indexed, and the metadata is captured from those documents before they're sent to a downstream system. I think these are best for large enterprise and centralized operations. More importantly, I think this became a little bit more valuable for customers, especially when we went through the COVID period, when people were not in offices to digitize documents, right? The documents that were coming into thing. And I think the biggest advantage with that happening, with partly remote workers and hybrid kind of workforce these days, and also the fact that people are more sensitive to PII, PHI, and information that you need to protect. A centralized operation allows proper chain of custody of documents and secure capture of documents itself. Versus distributed capture is captured at the point of origin. I think this is more suitable for transactional information. So for example, if you're a big retail chain and you're capturing invoices from your thousands of suppliers that are being delivered to your store, and those invoices needs to get uploaded for an AP process, then the distributed capture is a great way to do it versus trying to ship all of those invoices to a central location itself. So depending on the nature of the records, the sensitivity of the records, and the control you want to exercise, I think choosing one over the other makes better sense itself.
And then Sushil, did you want to talk about Gen AI and where it fits in and what's real versus what's smoke?
Yeah, I think each of us have a personalized experience about using Gen AI, right? Almost all of us have probably used ChatGPT or Copilot within Microsoft these days to ask questions, and we see it as great productivity tools that are there to help us with our work or even personal situations in many cases, right? And we have the same expectation of it in our workplace and how it contributes. Now, relative to IDP, I would say uh, a lot of it is beginning to hit the technology, and capture systems are beginning to get more modernized with Gen AI capabilities. I think the key difference is how do we make this productivity tool scalable and secure and productive in our organizations itself. And that's where, depending on IDP vendors who are integrating these technologies to make sense of it. So for example, large language models that are Gen AI bring may be great models for summarizing data and making semantic searches like Faith was explaining. These are great tools available there. On the other side, there is also, I think, the race of what I would call domain-specific language models, which are specific trained models for specific use cases. These also are becoming very important, I would say, in the implementation of IDP and making it scalable. Because as we can understand, the Gen AI or large language models are pretty large, just by the word it goes, and can be inefficient and can be very resource heavy, right? Depending on what application you want to use it for. That's really where I think going forward, most IDP vendors will start looking at domain-specific language models. These are specific language models trained for specific use cases. And if that's the only use case the organization is using, then that would be a more appropriate model because it would be less resource intensive, more efficient, more scalable model itself. And this is what IBML is working on currently in terms of making these AI capabilities available very close to the capture process, very close to the scanning digitization process itself, so that we are able to help our customers. Our customers depend on us to digitize documents, which is the first step in everything we do to make us enable digital transformation. And as part of that, they also depend on us to capture the metadata. So downstream process, earlier in the process, we help our customers do this, and we are beginning to use these AI technologies to make that metadata capture more efficient, more seamless. I think the big difference versus legacy capture systems in using these AI models is the simplicity of setup, right? So you're not writing big code or regets or anything to identify the data or training models with very lots and lots of documents before it gets accurate. So the domain specific language models or the LLM models are able to get started day one with very little training and be able to produce fairly decent accurate results itself.
So the domain-specific language models, also called small language models, as opposed to large
Yep.
language. Can you give some examples of some use cases about
Yeah,
where you folks use it?
absolutely. So for example, loan processing, if you take, right, within a banking environment, it could be very specific. Invoice processing could be very specific. Contract understanding, could be very specific language models. One of the big use cases we see for small language models is in government itself is FOIA. For helping to find and redact information relative to PII and be able to publish those documents. One of our large customers that we were in discussions with recently, they were telling us how they have these tons and tons of records that they want to publish. They are a library, and they want to publish this information, but they really cannot publish it because they first have to put in all this work even before digitizing the documents to make sure there's no PII information. Versus what if they were able to have the ability to simply digitize everything, and then the AI model was able to pick out and extract all the PII information from this and redact it and make it easier to publish, right? So I think these are some of the key areas where I see small language models going forward being very useful in making these applications more possible.
Those folks in the audience here, as they're looking for opportunities to use IDP, what are some of the so-called quick wins? So that's, you've got effort here, you've got impact here, low to high impact, and you've got effort here. And so what you look for first are the quick wins, which are high impact, but low effort.
I'll tell you, typically for us, I mean, again, I'll speak to you from an experience from an IBML perspective, is some of the common ones that IBML is involved in are, and our easy wins is, for example, tax processing, social benefits. So anything to do with money, catches people's attention immediately. Either you can get the money in faster or distribute it in a more efficient manner. Anything like that gets easy attention, easy ROI justification, and are easy ones to go after. But other areas that our customers are in are government services like passports, driver's license, immigration, public records for registration like land, vehicle, marriage. These are all great areas of records management where we are, which are easy wins to justify. And I think the other important thing with these Gen AI capabilities I want to mention quickly, Rich, is I think there are applications out there which people never thought of digitizing before because it was just too hard, or they thought that you cannot extract the information or extract valuable information from those documents. And I think people are beginning to rethink those applications. Unfortunately, I can't mention the departments, but there are departments within government where they thought, hey, we can never read this data. It's all handwritten and it's not in regular forms. And now with Gen AI, visual language models and so on, we are able to extract information even from very badly written cursive handwriting information, right? So this opens up doors now for customers to rethink their digitization strategy and records they have not digitized in the past and are being available now, and make it capable for organizations to look at now for digitization and for extraction of information itself.
So it makes things, what you could digitize before, it does it better. So if you get from 95% accuracy to 99.9 and above, it does formerly intractable problems that documents and fields now are tractable. So handwriting, you mentioned, handprints, very interesting. It also, as you indicated, it also lets you do new applications so that you can actually do IDP anywhere in the process. And so you might have something which already had been OCR'd, but there's still remaining stuff on it or whatever, or you want to query it and ask it some questions to be able to come to a decision, and you can use that. That's great.
Yeah. So our customers today spend a lot of resources, for example, in manual keying of data, right? Because they were not readable by traditional OCR, but AI-based capabilities today, visual language models and so on, are able to do that, and hence can either reduce the resources required there and put those resources into better use. in records management applications itself.
So let's talk about some of the mandates, government mandates. Can you talk about M2307? What it
Yeah.
is? Not all of us know. I know, of course, but maybe for the rest of the audience. No.
I'm sure most of this audience, especially our federal audience, know this very well, right? The M2307 memorandum issued by the Office of Management and Budget at OMB and National Archives Records Administration is a major digitization mandate for all US federal agencies. It updates and reinforces the earlier M1921 directory, pushing agencies towards a fully electronic records environment, wherein all temporary and permanent records needs to be managed electronically and no more paper transfers to NARA, unless it's of really high historical importance and historical value, right? So IBML helps agencies in these areas, but one of the standards they introduce as part of this process, Rich, is the FAGI standard, right? Federal Digital Guidelines Initiative, the FAGI standard for various records. And similarly, there is a standard today for imaging and for how document imaging needs to be carried on to ensure those records are retrievable in the future, readable in the future, easily extractable in the future itself. So this, we have a seamless integration with the native software that needs to authenticate these images and certify these are FAGI 3-star or 4-star rated images. We have a seamless integration in play that allows our customers in their mailrooms to easily implement this standard without slowing down any of their processes currently and be able to achieve that standard very easily itself. I think this is a great initiative that NARA put in place with FAGI, because I don't think, of course, it's applicable for all federal records, right? But I think it is also very much applicable for any state government records to follow through. This only ensures for them that these records being digitized are of a good standard and is easily retrievable in the future itself, and for any organization that matter in the world.
Gotcha. Hey, I'm gonna be a risk taker and ask one more question. So,
Yep.
and this will come up in the panel too, but so how do I get started? Do I do a RFP? Do I do a proof of concept, a pilot? What should I be doing?
Great question. I think basics of projects apply to this, like anything else. My advice always when we engage in the many years I've been involved in this business and engaged with clients is I always say, let's not try to boil the ocean, right? Because there are so many use cases you'll find even within a given organization. I think picking a quick win, being able to implement that and showing success and ROI for it is very, very important for the success of a technology within an organization itself, right? So that would be my most simple advice, really, for any organization that's looking to adopt the technology new, right? Or even if they have this technology in place and is having legacy capture in place and are looking to update their technology with Gen AI capabilities, don't try to solve every problem you have with Gen AI or the new AI capabilities. Pick one, that's an easy win, show the win, and that really gives you the right to move forward. And I think that's been a little bit of a downturn for our industry and for our technology itself, where in legacy capture systems, you spend so much of time implementing these solutions and setting up these solutions itself that people tend to lose interest in those projects. Never let that happen. So pick the quick win, implement it, show success to the key stakeholders, gain the right to advance in the mission.
Gotcha. So I think that's it for this segment. Sasha, I think we're ready to begin the panel.
Right on time.
On time, on budget. Hey, guys. So I'd like to start with, can you start, let's talk about success stories. Let's start happy. So Joe, can you talk about, give some examples, some anecdotes of using the Fife technology, whether it's for FOIA and records management or contract management or e-discovery or accounts payable. Let's put some meat on the bones and give us some, how it all works, what happened.
Yeah, sounds good. And frame it in the context of AI. Yes,
Yeah.
we're talking AI.
Yes.
So here we go. So yeah, I mean we've obviously have a long track record of working with our customers. And one of the, I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, one of the key initial use cases that's really low risk and super high impact is within records categorization, right? This is and when we look at this as a first initial use case, it's a great one that is actually very hard to, in a way, calculate ROI on, which a lot of folks want to do, but it's hard to calculate ROI because in most cases, doing proper records management of these unstructured systems, file share, SharePoint, OneDrive, et cetera, it has been nearly impossible to do so. And if it was being done, it hasn't quite been done to the right standard. So, but it's a really great first use case. It's easy to get started. Everyone already has records control schedules that are out there. Some are waiting for them to be approved, different changes to them. But for the most part, for the records managers and records officers who are on the line, you have the clear descriptions, you have the clear definitions. And when you engage on implementing AI to do categorization here, we're really talking about simple modifications to that control schedule to find big results in terms of automation using generative AI.
And then with Mark's admonition in mind that it's not about compliance, the primary thing is effectiveness. Do you use the same technology? Is it metadata extractor, or can you use the same solution to then extract other information which can aid decision making, like dates, and places, and people?
You absolutely can, and that's, I would say, if we're looking at the top two great use cases to get going, extracting the metadata is number two. It's super simple to do, and it's super simple. It's immediate, and we do it in such a way that there's no risk for runaway AI tokens, if you will. So the expense is relatively low, and again, this is another example, I think, of where there actually have been, of course, technologies that have done these such things in the past, doing machine learning, using NLP, which has been prominent, but I would refer to it sort of as older AI technology now. But really, as I was stating, the instruction that's provided to the language models is really simple natural language based instruction. And so not only can it be done, and can it be done quickly and vastly, but it can be done by the domain expert, right? The records officer who's on the line today, who's thinking about this, how to prompt the system. If you've been playing with ChatGPT or other technologies, extracting that metadata is really as simple as you would tell a human to do that same task. So it's really quite an exciting and impressive use case.
Which brings me over to Mark. So Mark, can you talk about some of the use cases either that have been done or that you would like to do using AI?
I mean, I think Joe's presentation on how it can potentially be used is huge. The organization, DoD, I'm more about you need to produce this outcome than how you get there, right? So tend to talk about this big picture wise. I can talk about a lot of information or a lot of concern in the news regarding ephemeral information in telephone apps and things of that nature. In addition to your traditional business type data, you have this mobile data, which is a challenge, and recognizing that records is not the only stakeholder. So in the policy world, that makes it challenging because the policy, for example, for mobile apps is actually maintained by another part of the CIO office. And we just participated in that from a policy perspective, ensuring that not only are the cybersecurity issues addressed, but that the records management issues are addressed. How those are addressed continue to be a challenge, in regard to this particular type of data. I'll just put the publicly available policy that I'm talking about in a link to it in the chat. So NARA spoke about it. They talk about, capstone, for example. So they're going after information in a roles-based way. So figuring out how to do that across multiple systems for senior officials and then for everyone else becomes a challenge, because it's easy to say you must do this, and it becomes technically more challenging to actually accomplish that, and really expensive and complicated. So success stories in that particular environment, mobile ephemeral data, that kind of stuff that's been in the news recently, challenging. There are needs to do this, to use these types of tools, and the capture of the data is challenging. Once you get it into a system, that's different.
Well, here, Mark,
Successful.
so
Go
here's
ahead.
something. So for all three of you, at AIM, at the summit, right, in early April, I talked to a lot of government and government adjacent folks at labs, public service and so on. And the number one need that folks were talking about was question and answers of documents and data, which might be in one bucket or might be all over the place, to facilitate. So to grab them all together, to summarize them, to understand them, to analyze them, to make recommendations, to act on them automatically with a robot or with a human. So are there any, so that seems to be kind of a universal quick win. And it's certainly all the vendors that I saw, most of the vendors that I saw at AIM also were trying to do something like that. Is there anything, can you give an example of, Mark, of a question and answer of an agent?
The challenge there is the complexity of doing that in an environment where you have lots of sensitive information, right? And you have so many repositories, and the discipline with which that stuff is tagged or marked is weak, because it's been kept over here, And so that is the challenge of doing that in our environment, is that what the tech can do, but the policy ramifications of that become challenging. So you have to go beyond just what's possible. So questions come up about using AI, and in this conversation I had with an attorney earlier today who was mulling over this, I was like, in my opinion, something that's a human in the government, and this is not really my human, it's my opinion, it's fact. A human will take responsibility for a decision. So you can't say, you can't blame it on the AI. So then the question becomes, how do you handle that information to ensure, as it moves about, that information is authoritative and approved as official agency position, or it's just some draft product that somebody used querying a system? That ultimately, accountability has to remain. So that is a challenge. And then there was the problem I talked about earlier, that if you put all this data together, you can create security classification challenges. You can PII challenges. You could increase your risk surface. So there are a lot of stakeholders in that. So that are policy challenges for what tech makes possible.
So, and Sushil, I'm going to get to you for just 1 second. I just want to follow up the risk
problem.
thing. So, Joe, another tagline or whatever, I don't know why I have these in mind, for a fight is compliance, security, auditability. So can you talk about, in the commercial sector and in government, the folks are justifiably concerned about security and privacy of once you start using AI. So can you talk about, and Fight's got the reputation definitely of having that locked down, being able to do that, no problem. Can you talk about best practices for compliance, security, auditability?
I love these taglines, Rich, that you're coming up with. You have to show me where these are.
Right
But
here,
yeah,
I did
okay. You may have got it from querying ChatGPT, and it may be out there and it may be true.
No, it's Fight. It's actually from Fight.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that's I am not our chief marketer, so I don't have an eye on all the taglines, but it's a good one, and I appreciate it. So yeah, compliance, security, and auditability. As Mark is saying here, like one of the big challenges with aggregating these data sets so that you can make them possible to be further interrogated, whether it be through chat, semantic search, or other methods, is certainly about the security of that data. The Department of Defense has been very big on zero trust. Obviously, lately, I think the zero trust strategy may have come out soon after the record strategy, Mark. But certainly, this we need to be careful of what is the information that we're dealing with and how we're locking it down. From a security aspect, yes, Fife in working with the Department of Defense has had that on lock for quite some time in terms of dealing with classified information and sensitive compartmentalized information. And that's handled through both role-based and attribute-based controls, right? I don't know if people on the line have that kind of knowledge, but when it comes to interacting with AI, right, and you know, ensuring that security is intact when you are working with generative AI, that's where you see things like RAG, retrieval augmented generation, come in, where the AI only knows the information that you give it, and you only give it the information for processing that comes from that user's own ability for what they can see and what they can do in the system. So in that way, it's fully respected. And while I think security should be a concern of everyone's, I don't think that there's additional security concerns outside of sending the data around the way you normally would, whether it be on an air-gapped network or some other you know, tool that you deem to be secure or network that's secure.
So earlier I talked about going from the engine to the car and so on. And so some of the other ways to control security, compliance, and so on is, right, make sure you have end-to-end logs of every single thing that happens. Make sure you have comprehensive metadata capture the way that Byte can do, and human review steps, you know, before you put it into some automated pipeline, perhaps when you need it. But Sushil, I'm sorry, he mentioned it, so I gotta ask. Joe mentioned RAG. Can we talk about RAG and explain what that is? It's kind of a big deal. Are you able to?
I can't say I'm an expert
Okay.
in this itself,
So
again, because we focus mainly on the capture side. I think RAG is more applicable. Go ahead. You were
No,
about to say
then
something?
Joe, do you want to take RAG? You want to talk about it?
Sure, let's talk about some RAG. Yeah, so as I was stating, and I explained it briefly in the presentation, RAG is sort of very simply like there's a couple types of AI that's out there right now. People are talking about agentic, which is, whoa, seems very future and not the topic of conversation here. And then there's RAG. RAG is a specified workflow. You can think of it as guardrails around interacting with these language models, right? And so in the example that I had where I'm saying, yeah, we want to use the large language model for its processing ability, for its thinking ability, for how it behaves like a human. We, through RAG, you can do a search, let's say, in a database prior to providing the results through to the processing layer with the language model, and then you can get that information back. Additional filtering can then be done at that point before providing that information back to the user. So, you know, for example of RAG, I think, for folks who are out there using ChatGPT, is that the ChatGPT application is what amounts to be a RAG, retrieval augmented generation workflow around the person who's querying and asking the questions, and then what happens in the background after ChatGPT receives that request, right? And there's some things that happen there, and then the response is returned to the user. And you have control over some of that RAG within the controls of ChatGPT, but that's just one example for how it's implemented.
So, and so one of the issues with large language models with Gen AI is hallucinating, false positives or hallucinations. That is, he'll be very confident about giving you the wrong answer, make stuff up, whatever. In the context of government work, you want to have the correct answer, and you want it to be the most accurate. You want it to be the most recent document, perhaps. You want it to be very specific, very custom to the question asker, and so on. So one of the things that, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things RAG does, retrieval augmented generation, is that it doesn't pull from the training data from 2023 on the internet. It goes to a bucket of documents or data or both of them or whatever, and says, of these contracts, this is what I'm going to use to answer the question. So it's a long-winded way for me to get to what one of you guys folks said, is that the repository, the records or document management system controls a lot of this, what's observable to the AI, because it's the stuff that's in that bucket, and it's the stuff that the LLM has access to. And so this is another way that records managers and records and information managers are extremely important in AI because they manage those documents. Sorry.
Rich, that's
I-
an excellent it's an excellent analogy and it makes a lot of sense. I want to add one more thing about that. Yes, retrieval augmented generation, right? Grounding the response in your data is the major, is probably the most important way to prevent a hallucination, right? But hallucinations happen when the AI doesn't know the answer to your question, right? And if we think of AI like a really smart intern that's new and here ready to work with you, right? Really super high IQ, smart programmer, smart developer, smart doctor, et cetera. You could have someone come into your group, to your office and sit next to you and be very eager to provide an answer to your question. So it also depends and matters with how you prompt the AI. In order to prevent hallucinations, and you can do this with RAG, is you have to be giving the AI an out. Okay? If you are not confident in this answer, tell me why, or don't respond to me with this level of confidence, right? This bravado. You would need to provide that same direction to a human who came in, who wanted to impress you and wanted to come up with an answer to your question. So please, make sure if you're looking to try to reduce hallucinations, focus on giving the AI an out.
Yeah, Rich, I'll just add to
Please.
what Joe said, right? In terms of how we are dealing with it, right? Relative to hallucinations itself. So I think Joe brought up a couple of important points about, what is the prompt and all of that. But we see it exactly the way Joe described it from an analogy. It's a smart intern sitting next to you. It's up to you to validate what the smart intern is saying as an experienced person, right? So we use, so in our implementations of AI, we are always trying to pull a confidence factor and use the confidence factor threshold to prompt users to bring human in the loop, right? Because we are the first step of the process in terms of capturing the information. So as part of that, we want to always be able to add our IP on top of LLMs to be able to provide a confidence level and use a threshold of confidence level to bring a human in the loop to validate the information it is captured. Gen AI is helping make this all very easy, right? In the past, to capture that information, I had to write, do machine learning or write regex or write a bunch of code to get that information out. Now it's a simple prompt. That's what Gen AI is really helping with. I think the rest of the steps in making sure that information is accurate is still very much valid steps that we need to put in place as technology and organization, depending on what our threshold of accuracy level is for these things.
So Mark, thank you, Sushil. So Sushil talked about some of the regs when we were talking to him. But can you talk about some of the regs? Executive Order 14110, the EAI Act, some of the other ones, the DoD records management standards. Which ones are the ones that I should really pay attention to in the next 4 years or so?
Well, there are policy gaps, as I talked about earlier in this area. And I think you have policy coming from various parts of the department, and I own just the records management policy, right? So I'm hesitant to talk about anything beyond that I remark on will be opinion, So I think that from a records management policy standpoint, we have to develop our policies in an integrated way. So even the record strategy was sort of built upon the data strategy that had been there, the Vaultus goals of the data strategy. And then we sort of envisioned that curation, automation, and governance, you bolted that on to Vaultus so that we were complementing the data strategy and that it was an integrated way. And that is kind of, from a policy perspective, the way forward is ensuring that all of the equities associated with the information and data, from security to records disposition, to access, facilitation of FOIA, all these things, they have to be created in an integrated way, which is one of the reasons why it takes so long to get a policy out on records management because everybody else in the world has to look at their equity for it and make sure that everything is good to go. In that specific DoD policy on mobile applications there, you will find the records paragraph that my office contributed to integrate that with, essentially federal policy on information management that was beyond the purview of the security folks. And so that's the challenge, is ensuring that all of the policy areas are covered. And this is an area that will, from a policy perspective, will be a continued effort, is to make sure that we're not creating policies that slow down the benefits of these technologies, but ensure also that that you can be assured of the authority of the information that's in the system that's generating answers to questions and such like that.
Gotcha. So Sushil, can you talk about kind of the process step, take your child to work day? And so show the child what goes on when you run documents through IDP, particularly as, for example, if you're starting out. So I've got a bunch of forms or whatever, and I have a set that I use for training, and then I have a set that I use for testing. What happens? What is human in the loop? What is the difference? What am I looking for in terms of accuracy and automation?
There's a lot that's packed into it, right? Each
Well,
one could
accuracy
be
being correctness, right? Automation being how much you can
right.
automate.
Right. So I think accuracy and automation are important factors, criteria that you need to have in evaluation of an IDP system itself, right? And implementing the right level. So I would say what is important is not to have false positives, right? To start with. And how can we make sure there are no hallucinations? And especially if you're using more modern AI technologies, how can you ensure that we minimize hallucination, minimize false positives, and arrive at a confidence level threshold that puts humans in the loop for validation of the records? And I think this is individual to every organization, depending on what we are seeing. And I believe this is where implementation of small language models or specific use cases could be very valuable again, where we minimize that and are able to deliver fairly high accurate results out of the bots to start with. I think the beauty about the new Gen AI technologies is, unlike the past, we don't need huge training sets, and we are not going to spend a lot of time doing training of these systems before people can use it and test it and validate it. I think that's the beauty of the new technology itself that's coming in place with the language models in there. So all of that matters really in terms of what you would see and how you would implement for specific use cases. In an ideal scenario, let's imagine the use case was FOIA, right? For automatic redaction of PII information. And if you are implementing a technology that was trained for this particular purpose, a small language model trained for this particular purpose, you should be able to get into the technology, train it with a very small sample size, anywhere between 10 to 50 documents, and be able to. Sometimes for use cases like one of the classic use cases, at least relative to capture, is separation of documents, knowing the boundaries of the beginning of a document and the end of a document, right? Sometimes the data you have used in the past, where you've used separator sheets, for example, as physical separators within document batches to scan your documents. So the data you've scanned in the past with the separator sheets itself could be used as a training data for the model before you even get started. You don't have to do something new where the model can learn from that data. So it really, in any scenario, I think these small language models will provide you very quick results with small training data to be able to get started and test your results.
So Sushil, I'm thinking about, I might have a forms processing type application.
Yeah.
And at first, one of the first things I think about is so accuracy and precision, it's how many right answers do you have? How many wrong answers can you tolerate? And it depends. So if I'm just like routing the forms to people or systems to process them, maybe I can be kind of sloppy, but if it's regulated or if there's money involved, I need to be really precise. And I set my confidence thinking, so it's 99.9%. And then I see how much I can automate and how much doesn't have to be seen by humans. Is that right? And then I put the documents, training documents through, it learns. What you said is that today you need much fewer documents to train than you did 5 years ago. And it's getting
Yeah.
better and better. And then I test and see how it's going. And then human in the loop. In the olden days, it was doing just QA and so on. Today, what the human does is he provides the correct, he or they provide the correct answer. And then that, if you're good, that trains the system so they learn how to do that.
Yeah,
What the correct answer is.
Again, it depends on the technology you're using, whether it
Yeah.
has self-learning technology or no self-learning technology. Sometimes these language models do not want to implement self-learning technology because you then corrupt the model itself, right?
Right.
Because you don't know how accurate the model is. So typically, if you're implementing self-learning technologies, you wouldn't have operators train that. You would have a more supervisor or a curator level operator, right, who's able to look at the results and use that curated information to train the models if you're typically using a training model itself.
Could we talk about now let's flip it over and talk about not best practices, but worst practices. So things that we wish we knew 5 years ago before we got into this AI stuff. Mark, you're the wisest of us. What would you tell the young Mark Patrick?
Well, the discipline in metadata, over time, if that could have been sort of built into the culture so that you were metadata conscious early on, not for the end users, but for the systems architects and the folks that were providing the information environment, it would be a lot easier now because there's petabytes, incredible, huge, tons of information out there. I was remarking in this chat on the question about data centers that how much of that information in these data centers just today is actual information of value worthy of long-term, keep. So I think training in better habits and building in information management into systems, in the early days would have been much better because the way development came along, it was just keep everything, let it pile up. So that was bad. And that's the biggest thing I can think of. We're just surrounded by low value information and have to deal with it.
I'll do one real quick. And that is, I wish I was clear, 2 years ago about the difference between the dimensions of scope and depth. So what I mean is there are kind of two AI types of applications in the world or opportunities. And some are, so scope, I'm sorry, is breadth, whether it's narrow or whether it is wide and affects a large number of tasks and people and systems and so on. And then depth is how detailed and small domain specific it gets and how complex it gets and so on. And what happened, at least with some of us, 2 years ago or whatever, is we didn't have a great understanding, nor did the industry, on that like Microsoft Copilot is great. It can be narrow or broad, but it's very superficial and it hits the wall pretty quickly. Sorry, Microsoft. But there are many use cases where you can use that, but in other use cases, you should start out with something that can get deep and complex, like with the small language models and so on. That's what I wish I was clear about a year ago. Sorry about that. Joe, do you want to hit one?
Oh my gosh. I think your original scope is like over the last 5 years.
Yeah, sure.
And for me versus for the audience here, for me, I would say, we were paying a lot of attention to what was going on with OpenAI towards the end of 2022. I remember some of this news, and I guess maybe it was the release of the GPT-2 or GPT-2.5 or whatever it was. And it definitely felt like a big thing. And obviously as generative AI and the models have continued to get better and they're trained on more, and they still have a lot of room to grow. I think over the next 3 years, we're going to see continued growth there. But for me personally, actually, even as a manager, I'll say I wished that I had gotten my team more involved in using ChatGPT earlier on, because we're now 3 years into this, and I think that I'm finding that certainly with the folks that we're talking to, a lot of folks on the line probably fit into this description as well, which is a lot of people are just coming in to starting to think about and understand. And so it's a lot to catch up on very fast. And so, yes, if I could go back 5 years, maybe, or three years, it would be starting these conversations a bit earlier so we could be 3 years down the road from where we are today.
A lot echoes. So what we're seeing is a lot echoing knowledge management circa 1998. And the challenge with knowledge management back then, if any of you were alive, is that it was very hard to quantify. People got smarter maybe, but it was very hard to qualify the hard dollar benefits or other types of benefits unless you could do customer service or business intelligence or something like that. And the challenge with the peanut butter, the wide and shallow, is it's very hard to quantify and then to continue to get support for that sort of thing. So we really like the deep ones. Sorry, Sushil, I bit into your time. What's your
Yeah.
lesson learned?
I think from a lessons learned perspective, I'm still not at the point where I would say, hey, all this automation, all this technology is going to take humans out of the loop, right? I think humans are going to be more productive, be able to produce more results, right? And we are still in the same place. I think AI is going to make it easier for them to review things faster, get their jobs done faster, itself. Not me. I wish we could have adopted these. I think these technologies are maturing now that we can reduce the implementation time associated with these projects that we have typically taken long in the past and have led to some project failures as an industry, I would say. I wish that was not the case, but I'm glad that technology is evolved now, making it better. And I think we are beginning to realize the potential of small language models even faster than what we learned large language models were capable of. I think these are all good trends for the industry itself.
So Sheila, I don't think most people don't understand the scale that IBML and some of the other very large capture operations, what they handle. Can you talk about some of your biggest, like IRS or some of your biggest implementations?
Yeah. So I think we are involved with the world's largest document processors, typically rich, whether it is in federal government, state government, healthcare processors, and so on and so forth, insurance providers, banking, and so on. It is very typical. Some of our large processors are processing, even today, millions of pages through documents, millions of physical documents through our scanners itself, right? Besides, no doubt, the input, when you, as an industry, look at input sources for your business processes, digital documents is rising, physical documents is reducing. But in terms, yes, as a percentage, that is absolutely true. But in terms of volume, that is still very high volume of documents. I want to say, from the last industry research we saw, there's still about 45 to 50% of your input sources are from physical documents. And our average processor, I would say, processes at least 1 million pages a day, in some cases. And the lowest, I would say, is at least 50 to 100,000 pages.
So let's
Can I just throw in there a thought, maybe for vendors, I guess, is within the DoD, your average records officer is pretty junior in the organization. They have the fiduciary responsibility for the information for somebody that's very senior. This is challenging. And I've seen this for years, so that if you go in there and the complexity, I mean, I think one of the things Fife does that I like is that they focus on education so that they can give records officers the vocabulary and the added knowledge that they need to talk about this up their chain to other folks in the organization. But that you talked about the difficulty of showing the ROI, and I think that's one of the ways industry can help when they come in, if they're pitching to sort of the records element of an organization. They might be in different, depending on what's going on. But in that case is recognize that the records officer for the Department of the Air Force is a GS-13. He's the records officer for the entire Department of the Air Force. That's the Air Force and Space Force. Has a couple of contractors and support. So those folks need use cases delivered to them as a part of the process so that they can internally market the product, not as a records management application, perhaps, or even a process, digitization thing, but to show that mission value case from everything from threat surface to storage costs to efficiency to the ability to reduce the size of your personnel workforce because you can automate. So that is something that the folks who are key stakeholders need. They need that because they literally are so busy doing their day jobs that that's something that could be helpful.
Gotcha. So we just have a few more minutes, so I'll go real fast to Joe and then to Sushil. You can answer, you can give great thoughts, or here's a question for you, Joe. What is, Mark in the beginning talked about skilling up and using this time of somewhat instability and so on and uncertainty to really to stay positive and to skill yourself up for AI and automation and so on. What would you recommend to the audience what skills should they get? Is it prompt engineering? Is it records and information management in prep for large language models? What would it be?
Yeah, thanks for that question. But yeah, Mark is right. I completely agree. The upskilling is what needs to happen. And as Mark said before, you need to, it's not just learning some of the new technology, and it's also about learning the language. And I think that's truly very, very important. Rich, you just said prompt engineering. I wonder how many folks on the call even know the term prompt engineering, but it's something that I agree they should look up, and they should figure out how to apply it to their own use case. Because for the records managers and information managers on the call, they know their processes and they know their organization better than anyone else. And so it's important, of course, that they learn how to communicate in this way so that they can properly communicate with the vendors that are going to be there to support them, with their teams and their management. And then the other piece that I think Mark touched on that I really like is about sort of learning marketing and sales in a way. It's a tough environment right now. And it's an opportunity to tell people what you're doing, what you're thinking of doing, what you've done, and making sure that people understand the true value of what you're providing, let's say, as records managers and information managers. So all of those things are things that folks should be working on right now.
Excellent. And Sushil?
Yeah, Rich, I'd say as technology providers, we are here to make it simpler for users to adopt this technology and make it easy, right? So for sure, in the past, writing a regex or other things was important. Now you need to write a prompt to extract data if you're a system administrator type of person, to do that using Gen AI technology. So to some extent, that is important. But I think the important challenge as an industry we are trying to solve for our customers is, hey, from how do you cut these long implementation times to small implementation times, show quick ROIs for our customers. Do not try to boil the ocean, pick a quick win and show the results so that you earn the right to move forward with the technology. It's my biggest advice in adopting any new technology. And don't try to do a rip and replace, right? If you're using an IBML system today, see how you can add the technology within that and be able to easily demonstrate this proof point to your people, right? And sometimes you don't have to do a rip and replace to prove these things to customers. That would be my biggest advice to the organizations here.
Excellent. Thank you, Sushil, and thank you, panelists. Thank you, Sasha, and thank you, audience. And don't forget to fill out the survey. We could use the feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.